You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. It's really nice that the White Sox are not the biggest joke in Chicago right now, and I'm appreciating it as a White Sox fan. Thank you, Chicago Bears, for being more of a crap show over the last couple of weeks than what we were experiencing with Jerry Reinsdorf threatening a move that he never would make because it wouldn't make any fiscal sense, trying to get a new stadium and no lawmaker's ever going to give him. We had State Senator Bill Cunningham on this show recently, and it seems really obvious that's never going to happen. And Chris Getz is making moves, like bringing in a guy to direct hitting that's a highly regarded guy, getting Will Venable, which is the manager everybody wanted, basically, and bringing him in here to Chicago, surrounding himself with guys outside of the organization. Like, right now, if you compare the Bears front office to what's going on in the White Sox front office, take Jerry Reinsdorf and the McCaskies out of the equation because they're both terrible. You like what Getz is doing, maybe more than what Poles is doing, because at least Getz recognizes what's going on.
It could be. I mean, firing Shane Waldron is a nice touch for Ryan Poles.
Means nothing, though. Means nothing if you don't get rid of the head coach.
Yeah, and also you didn't build up enough of an offensive line, and there's all sorts of fun things you can say about the Bears GM without, like you said, without unfurling sell the team Ginny banners to have those taken away at Soldier Field. Not that there's the same issues within the ballpark as there is at Guaranteed Rate.
It's a taste. You know what this is? It's a taste for Cubs fans who think that they have it bad with the Ricketses, because what's going on with the Bears is far more similar to the White Sox than anything that Cubs fans have experienced. Like, White Sox fans are like, I don't know which team I hate more right now.
Right, yeah. We're just sitting here going, even the Blackhawks are a bit of a disappointment. They're a little bit of a hard watch.
Sox fans see the thing that was put out on Twitter, and I don't know if you've been watching these, but they're amazing. But the stuff that's being put out by Chicago Sports Network, where they just recently put one out, which is hysterical. Like, unfortunately, YouTube TV doesn't carry us. We're not about to leave you out in the cold. Go to Fubo TV. Nobody's changing their television service and their streaming plan for these terrible teams. It's not going to happen, especially when there's an antenna option. Like White Sox fans right now walk around this city like they have so many calluses on their body, right? We've been beaten up so much in recent history. And when I say recent history, like the last decade. And we've been beaten up so much as a fan base that we just look at this and go, that's what it means to be a fan of teams in Chicago. Like, we're not feeling the hurt as much. Like I'm not distraught over what's going on with the Bears, because I just went through it with the White Sox, and I care about the White Sox a little bit more. But I do like the Bears. I watch them every Sunday. Like, I'm not as distraught because the Sox broke my sports spirit. And so I'm like, you know what? They look like garbage right now. Go be garbage over there. And when you're not garbage, I'll deal with you. I'm paying more attention. It's really funny, but I'm actually paying more attention to the offseason with the White Sox.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I mean, the Bears imploding. Okay, it might get to a point where the Bears imploding means my Sundays open up a little bit more for some other things, because it's not going to be required viewing for me to watch Caleb Williams get sacked 9 times in a game. I saw that once with Jay Cutler, and I saw how that turned out. So been there, done that. I am actually more interested in what's going on with the White Sox and the fact that there's really, right now, there's just silence.
They're trying to trade Crochet. I mean, like, that's what they're doing. They have until the 22nd of November for the arbitrations. So they have to figure that out. They're about 9-10 days away. And then we're going to start to hear what they're going to do with the arbitration guys. So we can talk about that a little bit on the show today. But in reality, what they're trying to do is they're trying to take this time to trade Crochet. He's the number one thing they want to trade. And they see his value, however they view him, however Bannister views him, and the rest of the consortium that's making these decisions, the scouts. And they've talked with Chris Getz. Because again, as we talk about this front office, it's very different. I used to come on this show and say, no matter how Kenny Williams sees him, or however Rick Hahn sees him, But now when we're talking pitchers, I know that it's like a consortium of people, and some of them are actually experts that came from outside the organization. And whether they're going to be good at their job or bad at their job, it's not just Chris Getz going on a feeling anymore, because Getz doesn't believe he can walk into a room and just look at a player and know he's going to be great, like Kenny Williams believed. So right now they've evaluated him. And either they think that he's never going to be a guy that does 200 innings, or they think that arm is going to give out, or they think that like we can't re-sign him anyway. He may say he wants an extension, but it's not going to work out, and he's at peak value. Whatever the reason is, they're moving on. And you could sit around, you could talk about the idea of, well, what happens if they trade Noah Schultz, or can they trade one of their other pitching prospects? I don't think they're going to trade anybody. I think moving Crochet, Ed, is a way of saying we're going to roll with these other guys, and we want to hedge our bets with the young pitchers because not all of them are going to work out. So I don't know if they move any of their other pitchers. What they're trying to do is maximize what they get for Garrett Crochet. And the interesting thing about it right now, if you really are into it, is you go online and you look at what other fan bases, podcasters, radio people that write about their teams,
bloggers and vloggers.
Right. What do they think Garrett Crochet is worth? And it's really funny to me. Like I'll give an example. Red Sox fan base. Like Roman Anthony is supposedly already reportedly off the table. Fine. But Marcelo Mayer should definitely be on the table for Garrett Crochet. And you can't tell me the White Sox aren't asking for Mayer and Christian Campbell, because both of them are in AAA. Both of them are near major league ready. That's what the White Sox are looking for. And they're not interested in the single A guys. And you look at like the people that follow the Red Sox and are out there right now. They're like, oh, we can get Crochet for these 2 single A players and this rookie ball guy. That's not what the White Sox are looking for.
No, and that's the old Rick Hahn way of doing things of look at the pipeline list, pick 3 out of the top 10 that you don't think you're going to need, and go to it. And the rebuild idea, that the White Sox are going to be in this long-term rebuild, but they're really not. That's not what Getz is trying to do. What Getz is trying to do is he's trying to jumpstart it a little bit by getting guys that are close to being major league ready. He's made it very clear what he wants. He wants major league ready position players, or guys that are at least, close enough that by 26 they would be here. I would think that would be the extent of his limit of how he would go. So
and he's not interested in this long-term thing, and he'll hold him forever like he held Cease. He will.
Oh, 100%. I mean, honestly, the funniest one I saw of those was I saw one about the Guardians acquiring Crochet, and they gave the name of 3 prospects that were relatively close to major league ready. They weren't right on the edge. And the article even pointed out that the Guardians are thin. It was an outfield prospect. It was a pitching prospect, somebody else. And they're all in their top 10. And okay, it's a nice little article. It's kind of the same old thing. And it wasn't all that remarkable until I got to the end where the guy's like, yeah, this might be too much for the Guardians to give up for just one player. Okay, that's the most fair assessment I've seen of a team's fan base, or somebody surrounding the team looking at this going, yeah, it would be great to get Garrett Crochet, but do we really have enough to do this? Is this something that we want to do? Do we want to give up major league ready prospects? Do we want to play Chris Getz's game?
They would have to give up Chase DeLauder, and they would have to probably give up Jonathan Rodriguez, who got a cup of coffee, 2 outfielders that are ready to go, and then they'd have to sprinkle in some other prospects. And they probably still don't have enough because they don't have that infielder that I think the Sox really covet. I think they'd like to find themselves somebody who could play in the infield as one of those position players instead of taking 2 outfielders. But those 2 guys, those are examples of guys that they would probably want. Those are major league ready guys. And when you look at their list, the majority of their guys are not. So there's going to be teams that are incompatible. And, I look, we're not going to get the best. Like, I value my players that I root for higher than what their value probably is. And that's the same thing going on with teams that want to acquire Crochet. They're like, he's good, but we don't need to give up our best prospects because I want to see them on the field with Garrett Crochet. And somewhere in the middle, you're going to fall. But the thing that's undeniable is that Chris Getz and his consortium in the front office, not only are they trying to scout not using that prospect list, but they're also looking for a quicker turnaround than a bunch of single A players. They're destitute inside of their system. If they're willing to move on from a guy like Garrett Crochet, they want the return that fixes the team. Otherwise, they keep him. Look, if every Major League Baseball team doesn't give Chris Getz what he wants, then you take him all the way to spring training when somebody panics. After his arbitration number is in, And they know what he's going to make. You just take it in there. Let the hype build. Get some video of him out there. Look at him. He's stronger. He's going to pitch 160 innings this year. He's going to be a star. We're holding on to him. We're going in a different direction. He makes a couple of other moves. He signs a few guys. And then all of a sudden somebody gets hurt. Or all of a sudden a team goes, we weren't able to get the free agent that we wanted. It'll open up just like it did with Dylan Cease. And I'm not afraid. Like, I was one of those few people, Ed, that was not afraid that Dylan Cease's value was going to go down if you didn't trade him before the season last year. I believed in Dylan Cease. And I believed in it not just because I was a White Sox fan. I believed in it by looking at his pitching metrics, looking at where he had progressed, understanding that he was kind of down in the last couple months of that previous season because the team was so bad. And while that's not perfect for you, like, I'm going to bring this guy on the team, and if we start having a bump in the road, he's gonna regress. Like, that's not the perfect candidate for a general manager out there to go out and acquire. But take that out of the equation. I saw the bounce back, and look at how he pitched this year. He would have kept his value up if he knew he was pitching to go to a contender. He would have kept his value up. He would have been in the business of Dylan Cease this year, and you would have been able to trade him before the deadline and get good players. He got a good package in Drew Thorpe and what he brought over there, Iriarte, and the remaining part of the package. But holding his cards, that's the one thing that I value with Chris Getz when it comes to a trade, his trading ability right now. I don't know how they pan out. I think he does a really bad job when he's up against it, and he has to trade a guy by a certain date. But in the offseason, knowing he has control of the guy for a couple of years, I think he holds him until he gets what he wants and until somebody finally meets the price. Look, if the Red Sox really want Garrett Crochet, they know what the price is today. They don't want to pay it yet. And Chris Getz would be smart to just sit there and say, okay, call me when you're ready. Because somebody, if it's not the Red Sox, somebody will call, likely before spring training really has even gotten started. Sox in the Basement listeners, switch to a new age of life. Keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living. Make it so they can get around on their own and live independently with stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, and even bathroom remodeling. Hyatt Home Medical Equipment works with your insurance. They have 0% financing for qualified individuals. And if you use a CPAP machine and you're unhappy with your vendor, switch right now. They not only have a beautiful showroom with all kinds of testing rooms so you can try out the newest machines, but they're going to get your supplies directly mailed to you. They also have the latest and greatest in continuous glucose monitors. Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. Learn all about them now at hhme.com.
The best thing you can be as a GM, I think, is patient. And not necessarily patient with a guy underperforming on the roster, but in the trade market, even in a little bit in the free agent market, being patient and letting some things develop and not panicking. You don't want to panic and overpay a guy. There's always exceptions, right? If you're going to try and sign Juan Soto, you put your best foot forward right away. You don't play games with a guy like that because he's going to take the best offer he gets, and he's the one holding the cards. He's the one that gets to be patient. But Chris Getz being patient in the trade market is a virtue. It's not a weakness for him. And the other thing there, too, is this idea of filling up the low end of the minors as a way for the White Sox to, quote-unquote, rebuild. It's not really how rebuilding should be done in the first place. And teams that engage in this, usually their weakness is they can't draft and they can't sign internationally. They can't fill the low end of their minors. I think Chris Getz understands what he wants to do in the draft. And I think some of the low-end minor guys, I mean, you look at their top 30, and it is mainly guys AA and below. So that's Chris Getz's idea of rebuilding is I've got to draft better. I've got to find international signees and more of them that are going to be quality that I can pull more guys through the system and build up the upper end of the minors. He wants to either have the upper end of his minors loaded with talent ready to go, that they're not going to be necessarily ready to make their major league debut at the beginning of the year, or he wants to have a new team on the field more or less, because we've talked about the guys that are sticking around from a lineup standpoint. The only two guys that are really in that lineup for sure, 100% at this point, are Luis Robert Jr. and Andrew Benintendi. And that's because Robert Jr. is on a down year. He's not tradable right now. He has not played at full value. He's not achieved what they think he should have achieved to this point. And Andrew Benintendi's on a contract that, based on his performance, is going to look, even though it's a major league average contract, it's a contract that looks a little bit unmovable right now because He hasn't quite lived up to what his baseball card says, and it's a fair contract, and he's there. They have him for a few more years. So outside of those two guys, you need to rebuild what's on the Chicago White Sox. You need to be rebuilding what's on the Charlotte Knights. To a certain degree, you need to build up a little bit more on what's on the Birmingham Barons. You don't really care about anything below that because that's what the draft is for. That's what the international signees are for. That's where the amateurs come into play that you scout and bring in to develop into major league players.
Let me ask you a question here, because there are teams that I know a little bit more about that I follow for one reason or another. And some of them pop into my head as like, they could use a Crochet. And so I just, while we're sitting here and we're talking, I look at the Pittsburgh Pirates, right?
I knew you were going to say the Pittsburgh Pirates.
You knew I was going to look at, they're kind of like one of my secondary teams.
I know.
I used to live out there. I pay attention to them. They've been an interesting rebuild. They've got a cheap owner as well. I kind of...
They're an underdog, and you want to root for them,
I feel like I dig the old hats, right, with the stripes. I think they should bring those back.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like I get what the general manager is doing, because he walked in and said, this guy's cheap, so I have to do things a different way. And so he very much like what Getz is doing, although it's not exactly the same way. Getz is doing things differently than what Ben Cherington's doing. But he's tried a model of, I need to be more like the Tampa Bay Rays. I need to understand this guy isn't going to spend any money, and I've got to see where the prospects are because I'm not going to get a budget. So he's got nothing in terms of position players that are ready to go on his prospect list. He's got a ridiculous amount of young pitchers that aren't going to be ready really for next year, that are coming in 2 years. Okay. And he needs the win. Like, there's a lot of pressure in Pittsburgh. So the motivation might be to bring in a pitcher when he's got a low payroll. And this is the appeal of Garrett Crochet right now. His ARB number might be less than 3 million. So you can get a Garrett Crochet to come in and pitch for you, and all of a sudden get yourself a top of the rotation guy. And for a team that doesn't have a lot of money, that's got to be something that they're like, man, I wish I could get my hands on that. If you're a guy who's dealing with a cheap owner, you kind of want to take Crochet from another cheap owner. If you need that pitcher and you're ready to try to win, like you want to make it to the postseason. The problem is, all they could really offer, and it's not completely off the table that they would do this, but they would have to offer somebody like Nick Gonzalez, who really got his first year this year. They would have to go out and they would have to offer maybe Gonzalez and Endy Rodriguez, who's coming off his injury, who's an outfielder / DH bat. I'm sorry, outfielder / catcher / DH bat.
Right. I was going to say, he goes behind the plate a little bit there,
right,
too.
But they've been looking at him in the outfield and using him a lot in that position before he suffered his injury in the offseason, or I think it was in spring training, whatever happened to him, but he lost the whole year. But he's going to be back. Like, he's not on the prospect list, but he was a guy that was right up at the top in the top 100 and whatever. Like, they'd have to do that. Now, what they'd actually be trading you, though, is a guy who's about just under 25 years old and a guy who's already 25 years old. And so you sit there and say, are we too major league ready? And I would say, no, I don't think so. If somebody came along and said, these guys are ready to jump into the majors this year, we don't know exactly what they're going to be. We saw some real spark from Gonzalez. He had a nice month or two there in the back half of the year that probably went unnoticed. And they're probably excited to see him out there. But they actually have younger players behind him and could probably plug that hole with the personnel they already have and make that exchange for a pitcher. Do you think it's possible that it won't just be prospects? Like, Crochet could actually be traded for what used to be acquired in trades. It used to be you traded a major league player for a major league player. Do you think that's possible in this day and age? They could do something like that?
Oh, sure. I think what complicates it is contracts, because when you're going from a cheap owner like Jerry Reinsdorf to another team, you got to factor in what your payroll is going to be. But to the extent that the White Sox are shedding payroll already, right? They've already launched some payroll. Taking a guy who's in his arbitration years, even if that guy is worth, say, $5 million right now, and his ARB number is going to go up to 6 or 7 million because he's had a good year. And I don't have a specific player in mind for this, but just, from a number standpoint, that would be of a minor concern, and how many years left does this guy have? Is this somebody that you could extend? That's where the difference between a prospect and a guy who's already on a major league roster would come into play. But I would absolutely think that Chris Getz would be sitting here thinking, like, yeah, I could totally and completely go for a guy that's on a major league roster right now, somebody that represents a spare part. Okay, so you mentioned Endy Rodriguez there, who has already based on the fact that he has been hurt. He's lost out to a resurgent Joey Bart.
Don't forget the other guy they have, right? They have the other guy who was the catcher who was like really high up.
Henry Davis.
Yes, Henry Davis is still around.
Yeah. So you've got some guys, it's not like it's completely...
It's not far-fetched that they would move on from one of the three catchers they have and two of them are capable of playing the outfield and are bad. It's not far-fetched.
Right. And what you worry about there is now Henry Davis, for example, came in underperformed, underwhelmed last year for the Pirates, right? And Endy Rodriguez lost a year to injury. So those two guys, one of those two guys you would have to look at and sit there and say, okay, is Rodriguez coming back off of his injury likely to perform for us and do well? Is Davis something where we see what we can Ryan Fuller pinpoint something that he thinks can be done, because we don't have a hitting coach just yet necessarily, but is there something that can be done with these guys that can turn it around and bring them back to their AAA glory, their minor league glory? And that's the deeper question for Getz in the front office. But simply looking at it from a contract standpoint and saying this is a prospect versus this is a guy who just finished his first year but had a high prospect pedigree, or even this is a guy who kind of came out of nowhere but performed well. There's teams that will have some guys like that came up and they were rookies. They weren't expected to do much, and they ended up doing some things, or they showed some flashes but weren't necessarily a guy that they were going to be relied upon. And you could do that. The other thing you could do is you could sit there and say, is there a guy that is well established that the White Sox want to take on for the next couple of years that is going to help anchor their lineup, is going to help bring veteran presence to them, is going to be a guy that is superfluous on another team, is also going to help with Luis Robert Jr. and give him some actual protection, right? And all of these things are possibilities. I don't think there's anything that's not on the table other than trading Garrett Crochet for somebody who is high priced or at the end of their career. Those are the only two things you don't do.
Sox in the Basement listeners trying to make the most of your money, give a call to Tom Walsh, your Edward Jones financial advisor. Located on the corner of 111th and Kedzie, but serving the Chicagoland area, Tom has a get-to-know-you approach and a do-the-right-thing attitude. He's been doing this for decades. It's all about knowing your options when you're investing and planning for your retirement. No matter what stage you are at, it costs nothing to check in with Tom. Give Tom Walsh, your Edward Jones financial advisor, a call today, 773-779-0023. Edward Jones, member SIPC. Nicky Lopez left the White Sox officially today. He and left-handed pitcher Sammy Peralta cleared waivers, elected free agency in lieu of accepting outright assignments. The Sox have been doing this to many of their arbitration-eligible players, but in little trickles, not all at once. We recorded the last portion of this show before that announcement late on Tuesday. So you're going to hear Nicky mentioned, and the reason I'm not going to edit it out is I'm making a point here. I'm making a point about Nicky Lopez and several of the other guys on the ARB list as we approach decision time. I think Garrett Crochet gets his arbitration number from the White Sox. I don't think he gets traded till after it's done. And it's going to be about $2.9 million. Now, going into the offseason, the White Sox had 9 guys eligible for arbitration. 2 of them are off the team already. They let Matt Foster and Jimmy Lambert go. So that's an indication you're non-tendered. They outrighted you. And they let you become free agents.
You're not coming back.
So that gets you down to 7. And Crochet they're giving him his money and he'll be on the team until they trade him if they trade him. So that gives you 6 names on the list. Let's go through them real quick. Well, I'll just random order the way that MLB trade rumors put it down. Nicky Lopez is expected to get around $5.1 million, up from $4.3 last year. Looking at the White Sox roster, would you give Nicky Lopez $5.1 million to play for the White Sox next year?
I only because there's so many questions in the infield, and at least Lopez is the mediocrity as opposed to the mediocrity you don't.
You're paying him. You're paying him because you're looking at what's out there. Because if you look at the middle infield, there's not a lot. They're going to regret it. Here's the thing, though. They're going to regret signing him to that and then pulling off a trade later with Crochet for a middle infielder that they want to see at the major league level.
No, not necessarily, because Nicky Lopez has enough defensive value, and a team will absorb $5 million. Like the Dodgers could use some middle infield help. They could use, even if Nicky Lopez is nothing more than a backup infielder for them. For the Dodgers, a $5 million for a veteran like Nicky Lopez, a guy that can steal bases, plays really good defense, can be a useful bench piece for them, is nothing.
Here's my argument against it. I want as much payroll flexibility as possible, add a couple of bats. And if I'm in a rebuild year and I don't think Nicky Lopez gives me replacement level or better, why would I give him the $5 million when I can add it to my pool to be able to get the players I want to go and get this year and to get the pieces that I may want to flip at the trade deadline? And why wouldn't I just let Brooks Baldwin take the place of him, because I expect to be maybe getting one or two guys also that are major league ready in trades. Like, why do I need Nicky Lopez if I can just add the money into the pool? Like me, I would say I'm not winning the World Series this year and I'm not competing for a division. And I'm in a turnaround year where I'm hoping to be competitive almost as soon as 2026 if some of these guys work out and the pitching staff makes a little bit of a leap. So I would like to start moving in a forward direction next year. Why does it matter who's either the starting middle infielder at the start of the year who's going to lose his job halfway through it when Colson Montgomery gets here or whatever else we have move into that role, and eventually I might not even have room for him coming off the bench? Like, why would I do it when I can take the $5 million and throw it back into the pool of money that is already going to be small so I can address other issues and maybe have a couple pieces I can flip at the trade deadline?
And that's a perfectly legitimate and logical argument too. I honestly think it could be a coin flip, but I tend to agree with the latter, your statement, as opposed to what I even said, which it's weird to sit here and contradict myself. But the reality is that, you can sit there and say Jacob Amaya, Braden Shoemake, there's, even guys like that you don't really trust. And you mentioned Brooks Baldwin, which is a perfectly legitimate choice, that there's a lot of guys that you can throw out there and just sit there and say, okay, hold the place until we get to a point where Colson Montgomery has figured himself out because he wants to play shortstop. Lenine Sosa might be a second baseman. Brian Ramos might be a second baseman. Brooks Baldwin might be a second baseman. You might get a guy in a trade that could be your second baseman, or it could be a shortstop. You don't necessarily need Lopez, but he would be. That's the only reason why I would consider it, is if you're sitting there going, well, we don't really trust that any of these guys are going to be sustainable. It's going to be laughable for us to have a guy hitting 121 like Shoemake did last year.
Well, think about what could happen here. Let's say they pull off a trade like the Crochet thing, and they end up with Marcelo Mayer as like the main thing. He's going to stand at short, and Montgomery's going to be standing at third, and Ramos is also going to be trying to get in there, and Vargas is going to be trying to be over at first base, and you might be moving Sosa over to first base because he's bad at defense, but he was hitting the crap out of the ball recently. I mean, like, all of a sudden you have all these names that are going to be around the team. I think that's why I'm like, why don't you just open up your payroll flexibility a little bit, because you might want to add an actual name that could impact, that you might be able to flip at the deadline, that would give some stability in your lineup and bring in a veteran presence. I mean, that's where I'm at. It's another reason why I'm not giving, we already know this. I'm not giving Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets anything. I want them to hit the road. Okay, Sheets is $2.6 million that he's expected to make, and Andrew Vaughn's $6.4 million for being replacement level for his career. Please. Like, you move on from that. Think about that. That gives you $9 million between those two players. And that's, again, add Nicky Lopez in. I just found you $14.1 million to go out and get a legitimate baseball player. And you don't need these guys. You don't need these guys for this year.
No, you don't. You don't need them. Here's why. You want to break it down to forget metrics, forget draft status, forget all of that stuff. Last year, between the two of them, they had 1,120 at-bats, and they produced 29 homers between the two of them. That is your primary designated hitter going into this year and your primary first baseman.
Gross.
That is
disgusting.
Inadequate production from those two positions. You cannot live with that. And they didn't hit all that high in average, so it wasn't like they were on base machines. This is not an Eric Hosmer situation where they're going to, or a Luis Arias situation where they're going to be battling for batting titles, even though they don't have a lot of power. Vaughn hit 246. That's hopelessly average. Sheets hit 233, which if he had produced 3 times as many home runs as he had, 233 is livable. But when you're 233 with 10 home runs in 501 plate appearances, I'm sorry, you're not a major league DH, and he's not good enough in the outfield to sit there and say, well, you can do it based on his defense. They're just below average guys. They're busts at this point. And that's the sad fact about it. And so, yeah, you move on from them and you just, like you said, you've just saved a whole bunch of money that you can throw back into the kitty to try and find, maybe it's one guy that you're going to help build around.
Yeah, again, the 22nd of November is the deadline here. So this thing's coming up and they're going to have to make some moves. And yeah, I'm sorry. I feel like if you're already declaring you're moving Garrett Crochet, then you in the back of your mind know that you're bringing in new personnel. And if you know what you're looking for here, you can roll the dice if it doesn't work out and then recover by going out and getting somebody that could replace one of these guys in spring training. Because the equivalent of them will still be available at a lower price tag sitting on the scrap heap in March. And you'll be able to go get that guy. You could fill the role of Lopez or Vaughn or Sheets with somebody extremely comparable to them and maybe better than them for less money in March. So don't tie up your payroll now out of stupid pride of trying to either say, this was one of the guys I got in that Aaron Bummer deal. Don't worry about what you got for Aaron Bummer. You're going to get rid of him anyway. You took a shot in the dark. It doesn't matter what you got back for Aaron Bummer. I'm not holding it against you. All right. And Vaughn is not your guy, and neither is Sheets. So you should have no problem moving on from this and being fiscally responsible and being a little cutthroat. I want my GM to be cutthroat. That's the only GM that's going to win in today's modern sports era. If you're not cutthroat, you lose. Okay, we'll go back to what we started at the beginning of the show. Ryan Poles needs to be cutthroat. Doesn't matter who his agent is and why it's the same agent as his coach. He's going to end up fired, and that agent's going to have to find him both new jobs. Be cutthroat. Cutthroat general managers do better than the guy who sits around and worries about everybody else's feelings. And at this point, if somebody's feelings are hurt here, too bad. You didn't perform very well. Now, if I go through the rest of this list,
I would say, who else's throats are we cutting?
I don't really care about the rest of this, right? I mean, maybe I give $1 million to Steven Wilson if I feel like it's going to be okay in the bullpen, but it's a minor amount of money. Maybe I give $1.1 million to Justin Anderson for next year if they believe that it's worth that. So I'm not going to care one way or another because, again, it's a minuscule amount of money, and Eniel De Los Santos is at $1.7 million. Those last three names that I gave out are the estimated lowest amount of money on the list of players looking for arbitration. They're relief pitchers. If you believe they're worth that money and you believe there's something with them, I don't care if you spend it, because if you picked up all three of them, it's $3.8 million. And that doesn't move the needle at all over what you're going to sign and what you're not going to sign. You want to take a chance on one of these guys and say, I want to bring him back and give him his arbitration? Go for it. Because you should be clearing up money with the guys you already know aren't going to contribute, and that same player is going to be out there. I mean, is there anybody on that list you care about one way or another, Ed?
No, not really. But I mean, that's how you also build a bullpen. Justin Anderson, Steven Wilson, Eniel De Los Santos are all veteran guys. They're all guys that you brought in for a reason. So Wilson last year underperformed what his baseball card had been with the Padres, and it was partially because of injury, I'm guessing. Anderson, I don't know much about him. He's just a guy that's been around. And De Los Santos, you picked up off of waivers at the end of the year. So clearly there's a reason why you thought there'd be some reason to look at him. But $3 million to fill three potential bullpen spots, and also you can move on from any of those guys very, very easily without taking a huge hit. It just doesn't matter.
Right.
It comes down to, do you think this guy is going to give you something that is either going to be good for your team because you expect them to help you win a few ball games, or do you think that this is a guy that you can rehab and flip? Because that's what you have.
I think they all stick around because Lambert was at $1.2 million and Matt Foster was at $900,000, and they already made a decision on those two guys. Right. Like, I mean, it was like of those five relief pitchers, Foster, De Los Santos, Anderson, Lambert, and Wilson, we're all talking about the same amount of money within about $100,000, $200,000. And the two guys at the bottom of their list that they were ready to jettison to make room on the roster were Foster and Lambert. And there might be another guy on the list, or they're not exactly sure about, but they have a list. And these are all interchangeable parts based upon what Bannister and the rest of the consortium looking at the pitching believe they're going to get. They're not going to spend a ton of money on the bullpen, unless, of course, they go out and they pick up a player that they think they can flip later at the deadline.
Socks in the basement. Socks in the basement. Socks in the basement.
Socks in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on socksinthebasement.com.